Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Founders Grid, sponsored by Gaper.io. Today we have Daniel. Daniel is the co-founder of H20 Capital Innovation. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for your time and a pleasure to be here today.
So, give us a brief background about yourself, what you've been up to prior to H20 Capital Innovation.
Fantastic. So I'm originally from Colombia, a small city in the Pacific coast. I migrated to the US when I was about 15 years old and graduated from Gullah Preparatory here in Miami, Florida. Went to do my studies at Babson College in Boston, which I'm still very affiliated with. And then after graduating there, I had the opportunity to work directly with the general partners of a nascent, up-and-coming corporate VC fund affiliated to a Fortune 500 company. I was employee number one there, helped that team invest in about 6 companies. Some of them are global operations now. Started angel investing on the side with my current business partner. And sooner or later, we started building this fantastic deal flow base, started getting a lot of interest from our own investors, and decided to spin off on our own, created my own venture capital fund to invest in disruptive entrepreneurs.
Interesting, and many congratulations for that. So how's the journey been so far? Let's discuss the first 2 years before the pandemic, and then we'll get down to how the investment has been during the pandemic.
H20 was founded in 2018, so we are a vintage 2018, about 2 years in our investment period, and it's definitely had its challenges. You know, starting a fund at such a young age, I'm only 27 years old, and at the beginning with little to no track record, had to convince family members, friends and family to invest in us. And the fundraising was tough. Nevertheless, we were able to raise a good amount of capital for Fund 1. And we've been very lucky to back some great entrepreneurs and have been able to add tremendous value. So that has enabled us to first create track record with the entrepreneurs and for them to realize that we can provide great value beyond the capital, and also to our investors slowly been able to validate the track record on the returns, and that has enabled us to raise additional capital and to have a long-term vision and horizon.
Interesting. So pandemic, tough times, huh? So everyone has been going through their phases. And if I zoom back, or if I think about March and April, so everyone's talking about investors are changing the thesis, right? Term sheets are not being honored. If you're not into telehealth, you'll never be able to raise money at all, right? So your personal thought process, how was it like in March and April, and how has it evolved over the next 6 months?
At the beginning of March, it was confusing, and I was actually in Europe in January, and we have some relationships in Asia, so we started seeing this pretty early. I remember my younger brother was in Spain. He was basketball with some friends, and one of his buddies got COVID, and back then you would hear COVID, and I was like, wow, are they gonna die, and what is this? And then slowly you start realizing that it is a gruesome virus, but it has more impacts for elders, and for the younger folks like us, less. So that was a wake-up call. In terms of where I was in March, I was actually in Colombia for a weekend there with a family. I got back in a plane on Monday, and I came back to Miami before they shut down the country, and it's been under lockdown since September, so I was pretty lucky to get out in time. In terms of our portfolio and our entrepreneurs and our investments, it was a process of going directly to the fat, trimming the fat. Some of the companies that had excess team members and perhaps more, I would say, unnecessary or inefficient processes, really trimming those and making them better. Sooner or later, we started realizing for some of our portfolio companies that it had some positive tailwinds. So H2 as a fund is very invested in e-grocery and enterprise software. Those are some strong verticals for us. So anything that has to do with e-grocery or enterprise software, even with remote working, remote communications, has had a great run. So we've been very lucky to ride that wave and knocking on wood, 2 more months left in this year, we're going to have a phenomenal year.
Nice, interesting. So we'll come to remote work in the in the last two questions, but prior to this, as what three pieces of advice would you give to young entrepreneurs, who had just started out during pandemic, prior to pandemic, and especially the tips on how to raise funding, how to go about it? What advice as an investor would you give to these young entrepreneurs?
The first tip, and perhaps learning from this pandemic, is that given all these entrepreneurs and investors are working from home and they don't have to be in a traffic jam for 2 hours getting to their office and back and forth between meetings, people happen to be more accessible. Have actually been able to connect with very high level executives at some companies that before it would take a few days or a few weeks to get them to a meeting. Now people are very open to doing that remotely. So boundaries now are limitless and there's less bureaucracies and boundaries to reach people. So if you're raising a round, if you're looking for a POC customer, opening doors, don't be shy, reach out. And the best thing or the worst thing that can happen is that they say no, and they'll probably end up saying yes to a 30-minute call. So definitely reach out. I would say right now is a great time to be an entrepreneur, just because despite the pandemic and despite the early negative tailwinds for the financial markets, things have recuperated and there's still a lot of venture capital funding and a lot of excess dry powder out there that is waiting to be allocated. So if you have a great idea, you have a great team, you have the ability and guts to execute, go out, raise capital, knock on doors and get some funding, just execute, get going.
Got it. So last question, Daniel, because I'm sure we could have talked another half an hour, but my marketing team forces me to keep these podcasts within 12 minutes. Remote work. So last year, September onwards, after the WeWork debacle, the whole debate about the office rethinking has been going on. Then the pandemic came and we've been actually reforced to think again whether we need office or not. So once the world goes back to normal, do you think we will be having the 5 days a week? Or if not, if you're going for a hybrid version, how do you see the world? How do you see your portfolio companies going about it?
In terms of remote work, we will go to some normality, but there will be some things that will stay as is. Personally, I'm back in my office and I've been here since May, so my team is working presential. Nevertheless, we're very flexible, and if people want to work from home one day, they can do it. So I would call this more of an open campus. People come in and out with precautions. In terms of the investment landscape, remote work, collaboration, all of these developer tools that are being created to create efficiencies and to enable people to work globally, it's very enticing. I've made a few investments recently in this space. And then in terms of the roadmap, what is to come, I think people will get used to it sooner or later, and we'll find a new normality to continue our lives and our work.
Got it. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the show. Take care of yourself, stay safe, and we wish you all the best with all your investments.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to meet you, and do let me know when you're in town. Would love to invite you for lunch or a coffee.